The rain fell in slow, deliberate sheets over the cobblestone streets surrounding Buckingham Palace, turning London's grey skies into a mirror of the tension brewing inside. Princess Anne moved through the halls with her usual quiet authority, each step measured, each glance sharp. Even after decades of service, the weight of the monarchy seemed to press against her shoulders, a burden she bore with a mix of duty and instinct. Something was off, something that didn't sit right with her careful, practiced observations. The jade bracelet, an heirloom passed down through generations, its value both monetary and symbolic, had vanished from its display, leaving only whispers and empty air. Anne didn't need confirmation to know that this disappearance wasn't a mere accident. The royal security logs hinted at discrepancies too deliberate to ignore, and one name, in particular, had begun to orbit her thoughts with a cold inevitability: Camilla. By mid-afternoon, the palace was alive with the low murmur of aides and secretaries, the clatter of keyboards, and the rustle of paperwork. Anne sat at her mahogany desk, sunlight filtered through tall windows, glinting off the stacks of files before her. She picked up the phone, her movements precise, and summoned Thomas Hargreaves, a man who had been her shadow in more ways than one. "Thomas," she said, her voice slicing through the quiet room like a scalpel, "I want the archives inspected. Everything. Every camera, every log. Nothing is too small." Her eyes narrowed, scanning the documents again. The surveillance feed at Clarence House had conveniently failed on the night the bracelet disappeared, and it was repaired by morning. Too convenient. Far too convenient? As the minutes ticked by, Anne's mind replayed the events of that evening. Camilla, poised in emerald silk, moving with calculated elegance among the guests at a small tea gathering, slipping toward a dimly lit corner where a man in a gray suit waited, the envelope exchanged with an almost imperceptible nod. Anne's pulse quickened. Every detail was a clue, a piece of a puzzle that pointed toward betrayal cloaked in sophistication. She could almost see the path the bracelet had taken, tracing invisible threads from one royal chamber to another, leading inevitably to a plot far larger than any one family member could comprehend. And at the center of it, Camila, her composure immaculate, her eyes glinting with a strategist's precision, the weight of ambition hidden behind the mask of a queen. 3 days later, Anne convened her closest aides in the shadowed corridors of Sandringham House, the smell of burning oak from the fireplace mingling with the faint scent of polished wood and old stone. King Charles III, Laura, Camilla, and Anne herself sat around a long oak table, the room heavy with unspoken tension. Anne studied each face, the lines of worry and frustration etched into their features. Laura's panic was raw, the desperation of a daughter watching her mother's choices unfold into chaos, while Charles wrestled silently with the pull of loyalty and the need to uphold a legacy. Camilla, however, remained unreadable, a calm that barely masked the storm behind her eyes. Anne spoke, her words deliberate, testing the waters, probing for cracks. The first ripples of confrontation danced across the polished surfaces, unseen yet undeniable. Evenings blurred into nights. By the time Anne returned to her private study at Buckingham, the city outside had settled into a somber rhythm of rain against glass, distant traffic, and the quiet hum of a city that seemed oblivious to the games unfolding within its historic walls. She sat with the dossier in front of her, call logs, appraisal documents, emails, and felt the chill of inevitability. Camilla's plan was audacious, ruthless, and precise, yet vulnerable. Every move she had made left a trace, and Anne had spent years learning to follow the faintest trail. The jade bracelet, a small but potent symbol, had become both bait and key. With it, the truth could be revealed, the line between loyalty and ambition drawn in sharp relief, and the monarchy's fragile balance preserved. If she played her cards carefully. Outside, London's November drizzle continued, as if the city itself held its breath, waiting to see which queen would emerge victorious from the shadows. Anne's network was already in motion, moving like clockwork beneath the polished floors and gilded walls of Buckingham Palace. Edward Blake, the former MI5 operative, slipped silently through the misted gardens of Clarence House, eyes fixed on the faint glow of a carriage making its way toward the outskirts of London. Every shadow seemed to stretch in anticipation, every sound amplified in the crisp November air. In his gloved hands, a camera clicked softly, capturing images of the velvet box cradled in the courier's arms, the unmistakable glint of jade peeking through its lining. Anne had anticipated this precise moment, the point where patience and intelligence intersected with action. She sipped her tea, the bitter warmth grounding her, as encrypted messages pinged across her secure line, updates from Edward arriving in precise, calm increments. Meanwhile, Camila paced her private chamber at Clarence House, the low hum of the city beyond the thick curtains barely touching the room. Her hands clenched the pearl necklace at her throat repeatedly, as if trying to steady a heartbeat racing faster than the night's quiet should allow. Marcus, her loyal aide, hovered nearby, phone pressed to his ear, awaiting instructions. Every plan she had set in motion felt simultaneously precise and perilously fragile. The Swiss auction house, the forged charity documents, the supposed secrecy, each thread held together by her absolute control. Yet Anne's reputation for methodical vigilance loomed like a storm cloud. Camilla's green eyes flicked to the small mirror across the room, catching her own reflection, and in that mirrored image she saw not just a queen, but a mother driven to extremes. Laura's pleas echoed in her mind, the boutique's looming bankruptcy a drumbeat she couldn't silence. At Buckingham, Anne's calm veneer betrayed none of the adrenaline coursing through her veins. The team she handpicked moved with silent precision, navigating streets, alleyways, and airstrips with the efficiency of a machine finely tuned over years. Each observation, each intercepted message, each photograph of the courier brought the jade bracelet closer to its rightful place. Anne reviewed the surveillance photos again, noting the broker's familiar face, a figure from past dealings with European black markets. She could feel the pulse of inevitability tighten around Camilla's carefully constructed plans. The tension was delicious in its clarity. Every misstep Camila made, every rushed decision, sharpened the edge of justice and intended to deliver. The night air at East London's abandoned warehouse bit sharply, carrying the scent of damp concrete and oil. Edward and his team moved silently, the faint rustle of their coats and the soft click of their shoes the only sounds breaking the stillness. The courier approached the warehouse's hidden entrance, unaware of the shadow waiting just beyond. In a single, fluid motion, Edward's team intercepted him, the velvet box lifted safely, the glint of jade catching the moonlight like a signal of impending reckoning. The second man, an intermediary for the Geneva auction house, followed moments later, subdued without a sound. Evidence secured, photos sent, and Anne's orders relayed. Everything unfolded exactly as she had envisioned. A chessboard of meticulous movements culminating in perfect timing. Camilla's phone buzzed in her hand moments later. The message from Geneva shattering the controlled calm she had tried so hard to maintain. The words on the screen blurred as adrenaline surged, a mix of fury, panic, and disbelief twisting her stomach. How did she know? She whispered to herself, her voice barely audible over the rain tapping the windows. Laura, sensing the shift in her mother, leaned forward in alarm, eyes wide with dread. "Mother, if Anne has it, we're done. Everything collapses." Camilla's cold mask faltered for a fleeting heartbeat, revealing the sharp edge of fear. She drew in a slow breath, forcing herself to regain composure. There was still one avenue left: Charles. The king remained her shield, the last barrier between exposure and ruin. But Anne's relentless pursuit had changed the game, setting the pieces in motion for a confrontation that no amount of silk or strategy could fully contain. Back at Buckingham, Anne reviewed the evidence one last time. Call logs, faxes, forged documents, photos of the courier in motion, every piece fit together like a perfect puzzle. A web designed not to trap the innocent, but to expose those who dared bend the monarchy to personal ambition. Her lips curled in a faint smile as she imagined Camilla's reaction when the final confrontation unfolded. The jade bracelet was secure, but more importantly, importantly, the truth was in her hands. A truth that would reverberate through the gilded halls of power, cutting through lies, fear, and manipulation with the precision of Anne's unwavering resolve. The emergency meeting room at Buckingham Palace was hushed, the weight of history pressing down on every polished surface. Crystal chandeliers cast fractured light across the long oak table, reflecting off the velvet box at its center, like a silent witness to the drama about to unfold. Princess Anne stood tall, her hands resting lightly on the table, eyes sharp and unflinching. King Charles III, seated at the head, looked weary but resolute, the deep lines of his face telling a story of countless decisions weighed in solitude. Across from him, Camilla's face remained composed, yet the subtle twitch of her fingers and the fleeting glimmer of panic in her eyes betrayed the storm beneath. Laura, beside her mother, stared with a mix of fear and indignation, the raw emotion of youth clashing against the carefully constructed calm of royalty. Anne's voice cut through the silence, deliberate and unwavering. "Your Majesty, members of the council, this bracelet is more than a jewel. It represents the integrity of the monarchy, his disappearance, the false charity, the attempts to manipulate the system, all point to deliberate action by Camilla." She pushed the dossier forward, faxes, call logs, and appraisals laid bare. Each page told the story of deceit, every mark a testament to careful planning. The council members leaned forward, eyes narrowing, absorbing the gravity of the evidence with a mixture of shock and resolve. Charles picked up the velvet box, opening it slowly to reveal the jade bracelet. The system's glow subdued under the chandelier's light, but no less commanding. His hands trembled slightly, a combination of emotion and responsibility. Camilla's mask faltered, the faintest edge of fear crossing her otherwise calm demeanor. She opened her mouth to speak, but Anne's eyes locked onto hers, a silent command that her time for evasion had passed. The air in the room thickened, tension almost tangible, as though the palace itself was holding its breath, waiting for the final verdict. "You have crossed a line that cannot be ignored," Charles said, voice low but carrying authority. "The archives are under the oversight of the Royal Council from this moment. The responsibility you held, Camila, will be revoked immediately." A sharp intake of breath escaped her lips, but she controlled it quickly, the veneer of regal poise snapping back like steel tempered under pressure. Laura's face paled, shock overtaking her earlier defiance, realizing the full weight of what her mother had risked and lost. Anne remained standing, calm as ever, yet the fire in her eyes was unmistakable. She knew the battle was won, but the victory came with its own costs. Trust had been broken, family lines strained, and the fragile balance of loyalty tested to its limits. Camilla's schemes, brilliant in conception, had faltered against the meticulous preparation and relentless pursuit of justice Anne embodied. The monarchy's heritage had been preserved, but not without leaving indelible marks on the relationships that sustained it. The council members nodded, their decision unanimous. Anne's words, precise and unwavering, had guided them through the labyrinth of deceit, exposing the truth without dramatics or unnecessary theatrics. Charles looked at Anne, gratitude and recognition flickering in his eyes. The weight of his crown, of the legacy he carried, seemed momentarily lighter, the path forward clearer because of her unwavering vigilance. Camila rose slowly, the quiet dignity of her title intact, but her aura of power diminished. She moved toward the door, casting one last glance at the bracelet, the symbol of a gamble that had failed. Laura followed, silent, grappling with the reality of her mother's choices. Anne watched them leave, the echoes of their footsteps fading into the palace corridors, leaving a room heavy with the residue of confrontation, yet tinged with a sense of resolution. Anne turned to Charles, her voice quieter now, almost reflective. "The jewel is safe, the monarchy's integrity stands, but we must remain vigilant. Ambition will always test these walls." Charles nodded, a deep, measured breath releasing some of the tension coiled in his chest. Outside, the November rain continued, relentless, yet Anne felt a rare clarity, a moment of triumph, hard-earned. The jade bracelet had returned to its rightful place, but more importantly, the monarchy had survived a test of cunning, patience, and unwavering resolve. Anne, standing alone by the tall windows, watched the rain streak the glass, a silent guardian of history and legacy, ready for whatever storms would come next.